Okay, great. So, again, we only have an hour, so we're just going to jump right in. I wanted to share this again one more time, which I'm hoping you can see it isn't blocked by other things. Just our rules of engagement, which we went over during the first meeting, just to kind of guide how we're engaging with each other, with the committee operations. And today will be about precedents, pre-existing examples of plans, giving us a chance to dive into them and talk about them in more detail. We'll do kind of just a moment for some introductions, icebreakers, if anyone has any announcements, and then I'll introduce the activity, and we're just going to dig into discussions for as much of this time as we can. I thought maybe we could just take a quick moment to go around and say, what's your favorite green space in Somerville, and which pollinator would you be if you had to be a pollinator? Just to get us talking to each other. My favorite green space is Powder House Park. I'll go first. I live right around the corner from there and I love it very much. And honestly, I'm a big fan of the sort of like chunky caterpillars hanging out on you know, leaves. It seems like a really great life. I know they get to turn into things later on, but I'm kind of a fan of the caterpillar phase. Let's jump to Alejandra.
Thank you. So I would say my favorite green space in Somerville, I live right along the community path. Right along the community path. Did I say Somerville? Yes. So I walk there a ton. So even though it's kind of a, you know, long and some parts paved, but I would say that's my favorite green space, particularly the little pollinator garden, I would say. And if I was a pollinator, I would be a blue orchard mason bee because I love blueberries. Do I popcorn it?
Just popcorn or to someone.
I'll popcorn it to Lisa.
Let's see. Okay. So I'm going to be biased. I'm going to say my favorite green space is the Somerville Community Growing Center. Which pollinator? I don't know, but I really like those little green sweat bees. Just didn't know about them before I got introduced to all this world. And it's like, where have they been? There they are. Doing their thing. And I will pass it to Breck.
I guess I really like Nathan Tufts Park and I really like Lincoln Park. Those are my probably two favorites in Somerville. As far as which pollinator I identify with, I feel like I'm early in my journey of learning about pollinators, so I don't want to jump the gun, but I guess I'll say bumblebee for now, and maybe I'll revisit that later on in this experience.
Pass it over, Breck.
All right, I'll pass it to Michael.
Actually, my favorite green space is Draw 7 Park, which is probably the most unique green space in all of Somerville. And if I were to be a pollinator, I would want to be a hummingbird sphinx moth. And I will pass it over to Renee.
Thanks, Michael. My favorite green space is Prospect Hill Park. And sorry, getting over a cold. And I don't know that I identify with this pollinator, but I'm really enthralled with these. I think they're bumblebees. They're huge bumblebee looking bees that float at the second story level of my house in my side yard and just hover around, and they're awesome. They seem like they're just hanging out and looking around. So if someone knows what they are, knows that they're definitely not bumblebees, let me know. I would love to figure out what they are, but they're pretty cool. I will pass it on to David. Oh yeah, maybe it's a carpenter bee, Amy. Yeah, I think that's right.
Hi, everybody. I'm David. Should I do a little intro right now, or should we
Yeah,
skip
go
it?
for it, David. Yeah. Just who you are, your interest in this, pronouns also very helpful.
I'm he is. I am a longtime Somerville resident. I've been working with Green and Open Somerville for a bunch of years on various projects. I got to help design the Morse Kelly pollinator garden and the growing center. I'm really sorry that I was not here last week. I didn't realize the meeting was going to be so early in the day. I might be on my commute home during some of our meetings, but I work at Garden in the Woods. I've been a horticulturist at Garden in the Woods for going on my 9th year. So I come at this all from a very plant heavy background. Really my passion. But I'm very, very lucky to work in a place where we are very focused on the ecology of our Massachusetts. Anyway, I'm home today because I'm really sick. I feel absolutely terrible right now. So I'm trying to keep my head straight. But so my favorite green space in Somerville. I gotta say, I probably have to go with Lisa's answer. I mean, besides like my backyard, the growing center is such an amazing spot. And if I was a pollinator, I gotta say, I've always been enamored with some of the beautiful moths. I can't give any specific names, but I do love moths. And if you get to see them, you get to see some really interesting things. I'll pass it on to. Oh, and I gotta say hi to Alejandra. What are you doing here?
I know. Hello. I worked very shortly with David at Garden in the Woods. So hello.
I didn't see you. I did not know you. How about Courtney?
Hello. So I mean, I think overwhelmingly many people love the Somerville Community Growing Center. But if I had to pick something else, maybe it's not quite a green space, but like a collective green space. I do appreciate all of the various street trees in Somerville, and just being able to see, like, when I walk my dog, there are properties that have like enormous beech trees, or other sort of like oddities that you're like, how did this tree's probably like 80 years or older and like thriving in this dense urban environment. So shout out to the trees. I also really enjoy moths. I think they're very cool. And I would have to go with the rosy maple moth. It's like pink and white and like really flashy. So it's like wearing its own fancy coat that I think is really cool. And I'll pass it to Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm having trouble coming up with my favorite green space in Somerville. I guess I will say I don't know, the Morse, no, not the Morse, what's the name of that playground? Sorry, I can't. There's a playground in East Somerville I take my kids to, which I'm totally blanking on the name on right now.
Chucky Harris.
Yeah, that one. That's the one I was thinking of. So that's the only one I can think of. Need more green spaces in Somerville, so it'd be easier to come up with them. But for my favorite pollinator, I will say flower flies, just because I feel like they are the forgotten pollinators. Saw them mentioned only very, very briefly in the various reports that we just read, so I was feeling bad for them. So I'll say them. Thank you. Oh, sorry, C. who has not gone yet? Alejandra, have you gone? You did, okay. And then David went. I'm gonna go down my list.
Cynthia? Did you check? Vanessa?
Sorry, did you say Cynthia?
I think Cynthia and Vanessa haven't gone.
Okay, I'll say Cynthia.
Oh, all right. Hey, everyone. Cynthia, and yeah, it's a lot of choices in Somerville, although I have to say the one I spend the most time in is my own backyard. And I have noticed on late night walks in the last year, the changes to Union Square include some plantings along the bike path, bike lanes and stuff that are a nice change from how that area used to look. So I'm looking forward to more stuff like that showing up in the city. Which pollinator would I be? I have some swamp milkweed that grows along a chain link fence along the side of my house, and I get some really cool looking blue winged scarlet wasps there every year, and they look real slick. So that's what I would be. All right, Vanessa.
Hi guys. I'll put on my video soon. I'm dealing with some kid stuff right now. So I have lots of favorite green spaces, and you guys mentioned a lot of them. I think Nathan Tufts Park's probably my top with all those big trees, but I love the street tree choice also as the person who plants more of them. And I spend a lot of time in Blessing of the Bay. I used to live right by there, so also a good spot. Which pollinator would I be? I don't know a lot of specific pollinators yet, but I also really like the bumblebees, the big fuzzy guys. And I think it's really cool that bats pollinate things. I don't know if they do that in Somerville, but they're pretty cool pollinators. Thank you.
And Michael, do you want to just quickly, I think we got everyone. Did I miss anyone else? Do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sure, just briefly. I'm Michael Fager. I am the representative of the Somerville Conservation Commission. Just for a little bit of perspective, I have been on the Conservation Commission for so long. Lisa Bucalaccio, who was the conservation agent at that time, convinced acting Mayor Roach to appoint me. And I've been serving ever since, which, if you're counting, is somewhere around 23 or so years. I am also a naturalist. I majored in wildlife biology in college, although I made my profession as an attorney. And I have spent time doing everything I could to increase open space in Somerville. And, although it's a very difficult thing to do. And I think this is a great project to do, and I would really like to see us somehow take real steps in the city that's kind of afraid to take those steps, I think, based on my experience. So that's who I am. Oh, I'm also a big member of the Mystic River Watershed Association, and have been in there for many, many years too.
Thanks.
Mhm.
And thanks everyone for listening in today. Just quickly, any announcements that we should take a second for? If not, we'll just keep going forward. Cool. So we're going to get into discussing these plans. And I just want to say, like, you know, if our job is to be setting up the goals for the consultant who's going to be writing this plan, we want to make sure that our work aligns with the priorities of the city and its residents. We want to make sure that their work addresses the needs and opportunities specific to Somerville. Clearly, many of these plans are a little bit different than our contexts that are, you know, either working at an entirely different scale or in a very different, you know, maybe rural area. So there's some things that are not going to necessarily pull through neatly into our own project. And partly that's what I want us to be looking at, is getting to know what's out there, getting to know what we like about those plans, what needs to be different for Somerville. So I'm going to put us into some breakout rooms. I think some are going to be groups of 3, some will be 4. And I just want you to be considering these questions. What context does this plan address? Who's the audience? What were the goals of this plan? I think to Kat's point in our presentation, in her presentation last week, you know, we're going to have to decide what is the why for us. How does the plan reflect the public's needs and vision? How does the public come into it? And what kinds of proposals do they make, or how are they communicated? I'm going to put these questions in the chat for you to have. And give me 1 second while I just make these breakout rooms. No, we're missing a couple people. Louisa, I'm just going to pop you into one. You can just listen on. Lee and William, I'm going to do the same thing. Just feel free to listen and we'll take public comment at the end as well. And I'm just going to kind of circulate around. If you're in a room with 4 people who've read these plans and are chatting, take about 5 minutes each. If you're in a room with 3, take about 6 minutes. We'll do 20 minutes and I'll send you all a message when we need to come back. You'll get a timer.
Is there
Okay.
a note about note taking in the breakout rooms just for
Yes,
me?
thank you,
taking the
Amy.
minutes?
Amy's doing the note taking, minute taking for today. If you're in a breakout room, will you choose one person, please, to take notes for your group, and then you'll report back to everyone at the end. Thank you. That was the slide I missed. Take note of the kind of big ideas, patterns, you know, what makes these plans unique, your reviews, and then we'll bring them back to the group and discuss how they relate to Somerville. So you can get into the specifics of these plans and then we'll talk about how this relates to Somerville in more detail afterward. Okay, I think this should work. I'm going to send you all off. And if you have any issues, just come find me. All right, I'm going to resume recording. So just a couple questions in the chat to like take it from those plans to Somerville, but I think some of you are already getting into those conversations anyway. If someone wants to sort of jump in and report back for your group, let us know what you all were thinking, chatting about. We can go through the groups and then just kind of get into this what is Somerville gonna do question.
I did the note taking for room 1, so I could just kind of read off the notes.
Thanks, Amy.
Won't read all of them, but this for room 1, you can go first. So we talked about a little bit about specific plans that we had read, but then we kind of got more into general comments about kind of common themes that we saw or didn't see in the plans. So I think we mentioned, you know, the idea of how much buy-in there is in the community for a plan is really important. That some of these plans seem like they already had a lot of buy-in. There wasn't really an attempt to convince people who might not already see the benefit of pollinators, but that for Somerville that may not be relevant. There's probably going to be more work that we have to do to show the value and kind of bring in a wider range of community voices about it, because some people may be very anti-bee, anti-plants for various reasons, and you know, figuring out how to outreach to those people would be important as part of our strategy. That the community outreach seemed a little bit minimal in most of these plans, or at least it wasn't discussed much. We mentioned that all the plans that we reviewed seem to be missing any kind of environmental justice aspect, or like pointing out the importance of equity and access to green spaces and the value of green spaces. And that's something that I think Somerville should also focus on. We felt like the Portland plan is probably the most relevant to Somerville because it's a more urban city space, and we liked how they really focus on things you can do in very small spaces, which some of the other plans didn't have. somebody noted the quote that if you got dirt, you can plant plants was, you know, kind of a good way to think about it. Let's see, we like the toolkit use where they sort of took different types of spaces and pointed out, you know, what's some species that could survive here, what's feasible to do there that could be a useful model for us that you could apply to. Here's what you do in a city strip, or in a, you know, a street strip. Here's what you can do in a tiny yard space. Here's what you can do when all you have are pots, you know, things like that. There didn't seem to be a lot of policy suggestions in many of the plans. Not many of them put forward concrete goals for the city. And from our group, it seemed like people would like to see more goals. Like here's a specific goal we'd like Somerville to work towards. There's also a mention that the Lincoln plan in particular, one thing we liked about that was that it had data collection integrated into the plan, like an assessment plan of how they were going to figure out if their strategies were working. And that seemed really valuable too, if we could add that. The lack of kind of information on how to find the plants, how to find straight species of the plants rather than cultivars or plants that may have pesticides in them, kind of how to kind of include that info without necessarily endorsing specific businesses. And we talked a little bit about who the plans were written for and who we thought the several plans should be written for, you know, making it applicable to anyone from city's employees to landowners to policymakers to people who want to advocate, you know, making it something that could be useful for all those levels seemed useful for us. We also talked about the city potentially creating some demo spaces to kind of that people could go by and look at and kind of make it more accessible, that they could go to these spaces and see. That's kind of where we ran out of time, but anyone else in the group wants to add anything? Those are the notes that I took.
I can do group 2 if that's helpful. I won't repeat things that you covered that we talked about. Let's see. One thing we noted is that we have an interesting situation where so much of our land is, or a lot of our land is owned by DCR, and probably the most of it is privately owned. And so we have this whole range of working, you know, and also then working regionally, even outside of the city limits. So it's, you know, we're technically part of the, Lisa noted that on the Portland map, you can sort of see that we're part of that whole area in a way. So it's regional, there's state involvement, there's private land involvement, there's city involvement. So that's going to be complicated, but, you know, gives us lots of opportunities as well. Let's see. We connected it with food, how, you know, it's maybe a focus we can take is it's also going to help. We have a lot of local food, sorry, my brain is, it's the end of the day. I'm getting tired. A lot of food, local urban ag. And so we can maybe connect it with that. Let's see, the European plan we thought was just not connected or not aimed for public consumption. It was really much more for administrators and people working with the, you know, landscapers, but not actually like, hey, public, this is how it works. So that was just something to note. Let's see. We liked the idea of the Tufts plan mentioning good enough. So, you know, don't wait for something to be perfect, but start, and it will be better than not doing anything. Keep barriers to entry low. We thought that it was really important to monitor, ideally monitor throughout, but at the very least start with a baseline so you know where you're starting from. Social engagement is going to be really important to build community. We also thought we're going to have to be really strategic about what we plant because we have so little space to work with. And so, you know, unlike Lincoln or Great Barrington that have a lot more land, and if you plant natives, it's probably going to be helpful. We're going to have to be really careful. And we didn't know the answers to this, but just getting the expert advice about what is the most strategic plants we can plant here to make the most impact for the pollinators that need the most help. Also planting habitat that supports all life stages, and also planning for succession of the, you know, progression of these habitats is important to think about. Just so as trees get bigger and as meadows fill in, and are we still providing the habitat for ground dwelling creatures and et cetera, et cetera. So just being really cognizant of all stages and all different types of pollinators. Lisa or Alejandra, if you want to pipe in, if I missed anything important.
I think that was great. I think just the social engagement, we like the term social contagion that the Tufts folk used. Like, how do you really get an idea to sort of scale up and be owned by the community, by more of the community?
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add is sort of, we really liked how the Lincoln Plan had met sort of a baseline survey and kind of planned for metrics of success going forward. And we really like the idea of not just including biodiversity in terms of, native species, but in terms of pollinators as well, but also having sort of like community building as a metric of success and how we incorporate that into this plan. So really liked that aspect of it.
Were there just 3 groups? Okay, well, I was the note taker for the 3rd group. Just to build on what has already been said, we did discuss how like jargon was very apparent in the plans, and just, how does a regular person understand some of the materials? How does someone who speaks another language understand the materials? And just the need for a lot of visuals and trying to explain things as simply as possible. That was just something that wasn't quite apparent everywhere. And I brought up just the thinking about Somerville's land use, and could we think about it strategically in a different way? I cited specifically the giant MBTA commuter rail yard in Innerbelt that, is huge land mass, but not really serving much more than trains, but could be another source for, thinking about how to combine infrastructure with pollinators, like the solar panels on the highways and having pollinator plants. So just trying to think more, how can we maximize our opportunities using places that people didn't necessarily think of. I think that's probably the things that everyone else, you guys hit on a lot of our points that we talked about, so.
I think that's all really great. I think the, sort of questions about, you guys are clearly already getting into the questions of how does this relate to Somerville? Like, what does this context specifically mean, given that it is distinctly different than, Franklin County? One thing I think I heard some people talking a little bit about is like, what role does the public need to play? Other thoughts about what's unique to Somerville, feel free to just sort of chat now. We'll try to not end too late, and I want to leave a few minutes for public comment, but if there's anything else you want to say.
I'll say one quick thing, which kind of hints to the things that are unique to Somerville, is that one of the aspects we really liked about the Portland plan is sort of the emphasis in corridors, and sort of having a mix of both really individualized private property and residential areas, and having that combined with things like utility line strips or large parks. And I think something that's really unique to Somerville is that we most likely don't have access to those, large natural corridors as easily as Portland does. So kind of finding ways to create corridors within residential areas, if possible. and incorporating that into our plan. So I thought that was interesting.
It also sort of riffing off what Courtney said in terms of sort of just access to the plan, just thinking about what are sort of associated products, if you will, that are shareable with different audiences. I mean, I was struck that a number of the plans had like 6 steps for policy people or land managers, but also like, you know, if you're a renter and you happen to be Spanish speaking, like what, so just thinking about the different roles that residents are filling, as well as those other people. But thinking about like linked documents that could meet some of those needs in ways that are more appropriate and tailored.
I know we open it up for the public for a few minutes if anyone, it looks like Bill left, but if anyone else wants to say something.
Hi. Yeah, there's a couple things I just wanted to maybe just to name here since you're early, one, I just hi. I'm just like really want to just say thank you, Allison. I'm like starting off with icebreakers and stuff. I'm like just so overjoyed that there's like some elements that you're all weaving in here that are about joy and getting to know each other. And if I can just encourage you all to keep those elements, commit to those throughout the entire process with each other. And as you're weaving more community in, like, please do that. The couple of things I just wanted to, I guess, ask about now in this space, in case it informs going forward, who's invited into this process early on. Today, I know you were all talking about looking at different plans and like positives and negatives, what parts could be pulled in for Somerville, what's irrelevant, what's relevant. And I guess I'm curious, like, where each of these communities are at on their plans and how have they, so I'm not that you have to answer this question here or anything, or respond to it, but like, is there a space where, or is there a recording where a lot of those towns and cities have already come together and shared their lessons learned that you all could watch, or is this an opportunity for Somerville could almost be a convener in some respect and bringing those groups together in a way that hasn't happened yet, and then get to kind of take notes on the side of all the things people are sharing that then inform the plan? So is there a way that you all are playing a convening role in some respect too? And the last thing I'm curious around like Indigenous voices in this space. So I think one thing that I was just frankly disappointed in terms of seeing who to prioritize to make sure got to this initial table is someone that is going to consistently bring a lens that is transformative around how we're even talking about our connection with the land. You know, like we're using words property, and like for me, I'm like, oh, how do we start to, even in these dialogues, you know, commit more to a way and more spiritual connection to it. So just like who's holding that in this process and is going to continue to bring that. And then I'm also mentioning around Indigenous wisdom and voices because of how this work is going to connect to reparations. So I don't know about the city's commitments to reparations and what the way this group is going to be helping along that. I say that I'll give a quick example of that in some other work that I'm involved in. It's around stormwater and flooding, and the town of Natick, they're removing a dam, and a lot of that work is in direct dialogue with Nipmuc Nation. So if I can be at all helpful in terms of putting anybody in contact with another person, their conservation agent, you know, or someone they're really committed, and how do you navigate that with other conversations in the community with people who don't, the cultural commitment to healing relationships with other people and then with the land too. So I just want to name that now. And again, I don't expect any response to these questions or thoughts I brought up, but I just want to name them for you all. And thanks.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, it seems like maybe we're good to go. If anyone has more things they want to say, that's great. I am going to send you a question about whether or not we need more time in this meeting, or if an hour really feels good to everyone. So you can expect a little poll from me at some point. But I'll just leave it open if anyone wants to like chat about anything else from today's work. And we got notes on everything you've said, and we'll keep track of those. Is
there a task between now and their next meeting?
You're muted, Allison.
I'm muted. Yeah, thank you. The next meeting, so I'm trying to get clear on sort of the meeting structure of everything moving forward, and I want to try to have more of an overview to review with you all. I think next meeting will be a little bit more getting into the weeds of like, how is our committee going to operate, you know, public engagement plans, what is our why, discussing sort of the RFP process and how we're going to be going about that. Also trying to leave a little bit of space for public comment. So between now and then, I may send you just like a couple documents to look at, or, you know, sort of the structure of the meetings moving forward that can be discussed at our next meeting. And I'm going to send you a little poll with some questions like, is anyone interested in going on a field trip together and like having conversations in person at some point? Would that be helpful for us? Things that I think will be nice to just like get a sense from the group in general, and then we can discuss more in person. So there's not any like big homework. If there were any plans that you didn't get to read that you want to read and you want to look at, like, great, do it, like go for it. This is a good opportunity. You can do it at any point, obviously. I am still working on the some little roadblocks and getting the video uploaded from last week, and I will also get this video uploaded in addition to minutes and things like that. We'll try to do all of that a little bit sooner than we were able to in the last 2 weeks. So if you wanted to review anything, take notes, sort of, I might try to think about ways that we can keep track of some of these big comments that are coming up that we might want to be addressing in our own work. If you have any ideas about that, feel free to shoot them over to me. So more to come in the next couple of days, just to kind of review and think about before the next meeting. And the next meeting will be May 8th. So we've got 2 weeks. It'll be at the same Zoom link. I'll send out calendar invites. And yeah, in the meantime, if you have any other thoughts, questions, feel free to shoot them my way and we'll just sort of keep track of them. But I feel like there were so many good ideas and questions that came up in this meeting that I don't want to lose them in, you know, the many meetings that we're going to have. So yeah, if you have thoughts about how to sort of make those shareable and workable between us as we are continuing on in this work, let me know.
Could we maybe just have an ongoing notes Google Doc or something where we just keep adding to the top of it?
I'm comfortable with that if other folks are. I can set that up and share it with everyone. Okay, great. I think that'll do it. Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Feel better, David.